We're going to talk about the strategy, and then we're going to talk about where we are going. Next. So for the structure, community transit, I am the DEI manager, and I report into the Chief Human Resources Officer, Cesar Portillo, and Dylan Holmes, the DEI consultant, reports into me. So we are responsible for the development of DEI strategy for the agency. We guide, support, and counsel across the agency on projects and initiatives. We also guide and support the agency to develop, track, and accomplish DEI goals that help to mitigate risk and advance bottom line business goals and objectives. So let's talk about where we've been. So I was hired into this position in 2021 to develop this brand new program. The DEI program became a division in 2022. We have divided up our work into categories that are based on best practices in this discipline. And the categories are normalize, organize, and operationalize. So since the program began, we have accomplished quite a bit. A few of the highlights for the organization are creating this position to lead this program, launched the dedicated DEI trainings and in our learning management system, and then provided opportunities for employees to really engage with diversity, equity, inclusion by leaning in and learning at lunch and learns and all kinds of opportunities over that year. And that is what I would say was our normalized. So ensuring that people who are new to DEI were just kind of learning the basics. So we knew how to discuss it and we knew how to approach it across the organization. And then we moved into organize. So we developed a DEI advisory group. They're a cross-functional team of stakeholders who evaluate and provide feedback on DEI initiatives and goals, as well as other plans and programs to ensure that DEI is infused in those programs. Then we have also created a inclusive content team. So that is an internal team that creates inclusive communication to strengthen the employee experience and support the agency's recruitment efforts. This year, the DEI division launched a DEI assessment to evaluate the agency and create a baseline to understand how community transit is doing as it relates to DEI. Next year, we're going to operationalize. We will take those findings from the assessment, we'll review those to develop a roadmap that will support agency strategic priorities, goals, and initiatives. And this is how the agency will operationalize the work. So the DEI division itself, as you saw in the org chart, is small, it's mighty. We work, the DEI work does not solely rely on 2 people, right? It relies on everyone in the organization. And so that's really what the goal is, to kind of spread that work throughout the organization. It's really important to note how we approach this work. So we approach this work from a gracious and respectful space of learning and shared meaning, as well as shared accountability. So this means that we expect and understand that people are going to come into this work at various levels. So some people may be brand new to this work. Some people may be somewhat resistant to this work. Some people may be very advanced in this work. And we know that it's really important to kind of make room for those differences. All that is really to say is that there are variations there as far as knowledge is concerned. And we may not ever really get to a place where everyone is in that same space, especially as we're inviting new people into the organization. And let's see, as far as this slide, this really represents our core value and agency definitions. The core value around DEI is that we align our policies, practices, and resources so everyone has genuine opportunities to fully participate and thrive. And then further, we've defined diversity and equity inclusion for the organization. Diversity as the representation of all varied identities and differences collectively and as individuals. Equity, the fair treatment and access to opportunities, information, and resources. And inclusion, a sense of belonging where your voice adds value. And just to kind of tag on to that, I've had people come to me over the years and ask, well, isn't DEI just for that one group? And, I've said, no, it's not just for one group, right? It's for all of us and we all benefit from it. And I go on to say that all employees are welcome to be a part of this work. Next, please. So this is one of my favorite images. Our creative team designed this because I was often asked, what are the differences between equality and equity? And I think this image perfectly demonstrates the differences. And I think that we have put words to that, but really this image says a lot. The buses are a little bit different if you notice, not just that one says equality and equity, and not that one is better than the other. Really, they're both important, but equality being that each individual or group of people is given the same treatment and access regardless of identity. And then equity, that fair treatment and access to opportunities, information, and resources. And just that we know in some circumstances, some folks will need additional support in order to have an equal opportunity to achieve success. Next. So these are our DEI pillars: customer community, prioritizing accessibility, engagement, and safety across all agency services; talent, developing a diverse workforce that is representative of the communities we serve; and employee experience, embed diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging to build a more inclusive and equitable agency culture. Next. So these are DEI key objectives. These are our business objectives: to set goals and accountability outcomes, improve talent acquisition efforts, improve the employee experience, and to collaborate with local, regional, and national organizations, and engage agency leadership in training and development. So some of the activities that we do that have fallen into these categories are consultations with our ELT team to develop strategic DEI goals, and inclusive hiring workshops that I would say is connected to both improving talent acquisition efforts as well as the employee experience. And then we partner a lot with different organizations in the community, some of them in your jurisdictions. Sherwood Community Services is one of them. We also partner with APTA. We're part of a DEI cohort. And we're also part of a DEI cohort within the Regional Mobility Partnership. I would say that as far as engaging agency leadership and training and development, we take part in check-ins, we support and guide with individual ELT members on the implementation and the progress of departmental DEI goals. And we know the work is having an impact. We have seen increases in equal employment opportunity categories when looking at overall agency demographics, which in turn supports the goals outlined in our affirmative action program. And, as many of you know, is required as a recipient of federal funds. Next. So this is something that was new for us this year. We moved into a more sustainable DEI program, and that is to say that we share the responsibility and the accountability for this work across the organization. That goes back to when I said it doesn't fall just on two people. The icon is really meant to represent a sustainable way of approaching DEI that follows an iterative process to share responsibility. So we design strategies that are owned by the organization broadly and collectively and aligned with the agency core values. We measure organization priority metrics that track overall progress over time. And then we act. We use best practices and embed them into existing talent and business processes, practices, and policies to ensure consistent application. Next. Another tool that we just entered into this year is a DEI assessment. So a DEI assessment is a powerful tool that is used to gather information about the employee experience with a review of policies, practices, resources using a DEI focus. Conducting a diversity, equity, and inclusion assessment is a best practice in the field of workplace DEI, and it's strongly endorsed by APTA. So why are DEI assessments important? They're vital to supporting that sustainable DEI strategy that I mentioned before, and it leverages data to make informed decisions for the employee and rider experiences as it relates to diversity, equity, inclusion. It also promotes strategic and measurable evaluation of the efficacy of programs and initiatives over time. And next year, the findings and data from the DEI assessment will inform the strategy and the development of a roadmap so that leadership can ensure resources are addressing DEI challenges and opportunities that support business goals and initiatives. Next. So let's talk about where we're going. So the direction that we're going is a mature and sustainable DEI program. That is the goal. We want to co-create a sustainable DEI strategy and roadmap informed by qualitative and quantitative data. We want to design a scalable internal governance model, including support teams for the program, foster a culture of inclusion that relies on psychological safety and change management best practices, and then build capacity, educate employees on best practices, establish and cascade accountability across the agency, and monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of the DEI program and its initiatives. Thank you. Questions?
Okay, I have one that's going to seem odd. So in your little circle, it was design and then measure and then act.
Mhm.
And I would think it would be design and then you act and then you measure on what you're doing and see if it's working. But did I miss something there?
It's, no, I don't think so, but that, I mean, that makes a
Because you
lot
need
of
to act
sense.
before you have something to measure, right? Yeah, like I said,
Yeah,
it seemed like it was putting the cart for the horse, but
yeah,
Put the three,
yeah,
the three up, and there's actually, there's six.
Okay.
So there's two measurements and there's two actions. If you go to the normal, Six Sigma stuff.
Yeah.
That's the real overall arching one, she's correct. But if you break it down to the six different ones, there's two data points, there's two action points, and there's.
we're gonna have a sidebar. on
this may stem from that, but this is very specific to DEI. And I would say that designing the program and then measuring the program and then acting it's a cycle. And so really it's measuring and then acting and then designing again, redesign. So, yes, it might seem a little, off in that way, but really it's meant to be kind of a cycle.
For me. I assumed you were right. I just wasn't understanding it. Right. Thank you.
I see your point though.
Okay, anyone else have a question? Okay, then I'm gonna ask one.
Okay.
Equity and diversity is one of the things that came out of Vision 2050. And PSRC is actually doing a lot of data gathering in order for us to meet some of those things. So I guess my question is, with us looking at the additional routes after we, after Link Rail gets to Linwood, we are using some kind of data for equity and inclusion to make sure that we're putting those routes where, I guess I want to say, where PSRC is saying we need them because of, say, a diversity issue.
Absolutely. The planning team uses an equity analysis in their work. So I wouldn't want to speak out of turn to that work, but it's definitely integrated into their work.
Okay, real good. Thank you.
Yes.
Anyone else? Okay, we are down to the most important thing. Oh,
Thank
wait
you.
a minute. I see a hand. Just a second.
Okay.
Sid?
Well, actually, I was just waving.
Oh.
I did want to just say, I've heard this twice now, and I really appreciate it. One of the things that stuck out to me this time, I didn't hear it before. I think you said you're taking a graceful approach in a safe space or something close to that. And I think that's a real important part of this. And I like the way that you're presenting it, and I look forward to seeing the program advance and get to where it needs to be. So thank you for sharing today.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else that's online? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Now our most important thing. It's the 2024 proposed budget.
So while the budget team's coming up, I'll thank Nishika for her work. This is something the feds are asking us to look at, and we're looking at service. We're looking at how we engage the community. We're looking at recruitment. We're looking at our HR practices. So it kind of crosses the agency, and it's, I think it'll strengthen our work. So, and make sure we're putting our services, our priorities where they can do the most good. So.
Okay.
Anyway, so with that in mind, moving on, I'm really excited to present the proposed 2024 budget. Not only because it's a great budget, but it really reflects what an exciting year we have ahead of us. So Mary's going to do the presentation. I'll make a few comments by way of introduction. We've got Unju Greenhouse, our Chief Financial Officer, and Mary Albert, our Budget Manager. And as always, they've done a great job leading the agency through the development of this budget. The budget rests on a strong bed of accomplishments during the current calendar year. We covered some of this with the Finance Committee and also the Executive Committee. 2023 has been a year of really preparing for next year and also responding to conditions in the community as we've come out of the pandemic. We've had a super strong focus this year on building up our safety and security presence with deployment of the Transit Security Officer Unit, with adoption and implementation of our rules of conduct, and aligning our security presence with our Service Ambassador Program and our Transit Police Unit. And communicating what we're doing out there to our community partners and our customers. So that's been a real strong focus. You've been very much involved in the development and adoption of the 2024 and beyond network, and the adoption of the updated transit development plan that shows the roadmap for how we're going to change service and improve service next year. We've advanced in this year, the Orange Line BRT project. The capital team's done a tremendous job putting that project in a position to launch at the March service change. So we're super excited about that. That's something we're proposing to fund and deploy next year, but the work to get ready for it has been in 2023. We've advanced our zero emission and long range planning efforts to take advantage of the policy environment the federal government and the state government have set forth for us to be able to experiment with new propulsion types and figure out how those technologies might fit with our service requirements. And to chart a vision for how we're going to serve the county for the next 25 years. We've moved into sustainability and the development of a sustainable approach to running the organization financially, looking at our impact on the environment, and also how we're preparing to hand this organization off to our successors from a human resources standpoint. And we've done all that while continuing to have a robust focus on strong financial controls and practices, and landing yet another clean audit this year as we get ready. So lots going on to put us in a position to be successful next year. The 2024 proposed budget is focused on addressing the strategic priorities we adopted at the start of this year. Our strategic framework is to deliver excellent service and focus on building a more positive mobility future for Snohomish County. And our strategic priorities respond to that. And the resources proposed in this budget are in service to those priorities. Our focus is to strengthen the employee experience, to attract and retain customers, and to operate sustainably. So as you think about the resources that are proposed here, keep that in mind, because that's where we're headed. Overall, the budget, next slide, please, is here. We're proposing a budget of around $433 million, $231 million in operations, which reflects service growth at the March and September service changes next year, and a robust capital program of over $200 million that continues to advance our facility master plan and our SWIFT PRT program, and our continuing adaptation into the rapidly changing technological world that is so important to the services we provide. Mary will go through those details. This doesn't reflect our reserves, but in addition to what you see on the screen, our reserves are fully funded. So we are in a strong financial position to move forward. And the last picture I'll show you is the financial look ahead. This is an output of our financial model and shows the balance between expenditures and revenues over the next 6 years. Blue being service, dark blue being capital. The green line shows revenues, which includes our projected sales tax revenues over that period, plus some conservative grant assumptions. And then the yellow bar there shows our draw on reserves to help underwrite the cost of our capital programs and our ZE initiative. So we are in balance, and we're excited about all the exciting things we have ongoing now and in the future. And with that introduction, I'm happy to turn it over to Unju and Mary to make the presentation.
Good afternoon, Unju Greenhouse, Chief Financial Officer. I'm excited to be here to present the balanced budget for 2024. I mostly wanted to say a few words of gratitude for Mary and her team. Mary Albert, our very capable budget manager, and her team worked really hard. Many months of work and effort is the product today. So really appreciate their hard work. They're always innovating and trying to do better in their processes, and tried a couple new things this year, and it went pretty well. And also this is an effort of a great team effort throughout CT. It's not just the budget team, but everybody, a lot of folks in this room spend many hours going through the budget and proposals, and being very judicious in our decision-making process. So wanted to say thank you to the, all the teams that worked on it in this product. And I'll turn over to Mary for the meat of this presentation.
Thank you, Unju and Rick. So I will try to finish this presentation in about a half an hour, and I will try not to keep you into the wee hours of the evening listening to the 2024 budget information. I do want to point out to you the budget documents that have been provided to you. If you do want a hard copy, I do have a few extras also. You'll find the usual elements contained in those documents. If you're limited on time, I think if you focus on the CEO message and on the executive summary, you'll get the meat and the potatoes of the budget. If you do have some extra time, I would encourage you to go through the department sections. Those are related to all of the contributions and the accomplishments and the goals that our departments have. And I think you'll find a lot more detail in that section. I did want to give a shout out to my team, and in particular, one member, Sarah, who has actually condensed the department sections for you. So we've gone from a 275-page budget book to about a 175-page book. And I think we didn't cut out any important content, simply consolidated it. As we've seen in the past, I have tried to include all of the references on the pages on the slides where you can find the information in the budget document. So if you want to get more information on any specific item, just look at the bottom of the slide and you can turn to the appropriate page in your document.
It does.
This first slide is a snapshot of what happens to, or where our funds come from and what happens to those funds at community transit. Our operating revenues flow into the general fund. That includes such elements as sales tax, our fare revenues, grants, and other revenue. We first cover our operating expenses out of our operating revenues, things like our department operating expenses. So all the costs of coach operators, mechanics, fuel, things like human resources and marketing, and everything it takes to keep running a transit agency. We pay for those out of the general fund. After that, we fund our obligations, our workers' comp, our debt service. And then finally, we fund our reserves. We have an operating reserve in the general fund plus a fuel reserve. We maintain a fund to cover revenue vehicle replacements. That would be such things as buses, DART vehicles and van pool vans, and possibly in the future, other types of vehicles, as well as a reserve for replacing our facilities and technology. And then after we're all done with all of that, we fund our capital program. So that is for new projects and projects that have been carried over from prior years. We fund these primarily with local contributions, but about 40% of our capital program is funded by capital grant revenue, mostly from the federal transit administration and some from the state. We project our operating revenues for 2024 to be 273 million. This is about 1.8% higher than the 2023 operating budget. About 3/4 of those revenues are from sales tax. The next two largest sources of operating revenues are grants and contributions, followed by Sound Transit reimbursements. Our grants and contributions are becoming a larger portion of our operating revenues. Then we have other revenues, and that consists of investment interest, which is much larger this year due to the Fed's raising rates quite frequently for the past year and a half. So we're seeing that category grow as a percentage of our operating budget. And then finally, fares is the other major category of revenue. Also, please feel free to ask questions as we move along.
Now, I have a question. On the fares at 3%, that's considerably lower than it has been, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay. I was looking at like, yeah, that seems low.
Do we know how much of that is due to the youth fair policy, and can we count the state funding in? Do you count the state funding in the fares for that, since they kind of backfill that, or I guess was that just under the state grant portion?
Yes, so the state funding is in that state grant category. So if you look at the pie chart on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see that state revenues are 13.6 million. So that's a significantly higher amount of state revenues than in the past.
And part of that's due to the youth
Yeah, I would say this is just kind of based on what I know.
Yeah.
We're seeing much of our ridership growth in riders such as youth who pay no fare and reduced fare ridership.
Thank you.
Our major category of operating revenues is sales tax revenue. The dark bar in the middle shows our $206.7 million sales tax projection for the 2024 budget. That's about a 2.1% increase. If you look over to the far left, you'll see the 2020 actuals. That's considerably lower than we're getting now. In 2020, when the pandemic started, we really expected the bottom to fall out of our sales tax collections. We were pleasantly surprised when we actually grew that revenue stream slightly from 2019. Then 2021 happened and we saw consumer spending grow considerably. We actually saw our sales tax collections increase by nearly 19% and then another 8.9% in 2022. So our sales tax is a significantly larger source of revenue than it was several years ago. We're expecting a little flattening this year. We've started to see this fall that sales tax growth has flattened out. We're expecting it to bounce back a little next year. We're not expecting at this point a recession to happen in the near term. Projections by economists seem to indicate that the economy is going to do just fine. We're looking at a return to normal collections by 2025 with approximately a 4% annual increase. And that's consistent with what we put in the 6-year transit development plan. Other key revenues are fare revenues and state grant revenues. So you see on the left, the $9 million fare revenue projection. We get about half of our fares from local fares and then another quarter from commuter and probably more than 20% from our van pool fares. Our fares are growing slightly, we think, for 2024. We have not bounced back quite to pre-pandemic levels where we were at about 19 million in fare revenue collections. Some of our growth has been, as John asked about, as Mayor Naring asked about, have been from those riders who don't pay fares or who have reduced fares. There is a silver lining, as mentioned previously. We are getting that transit support operating grant now. It is about 11.3 million for each half of the biennium. So if you compare that with what we're getting this year for state revenues, this is a considerable increase. So it makes up, more than makes up for riders who may not be required to pay a fare.
Yeah, I have a question. It might be premature, it may not fit, but as we move from running direct routes into downtown Seattle and going to light rail, particularly around the light rail, how do we see a difference in the fares that we will generate from those kinds of routes? And how is that reflected in here?
So it is not reflected in here yet. It will be in future fare estimates. We do expect that fares will not increase with ridership because many of those fare paying customers will be paying the local fares instead of the commuter fares. So we're expecting probably less fare revenue per rider. Does that help?
So another question, backing up to the grant that we got from the state that takes care of the youth fair and those things. So I think you said it was a biennium grant.
Yes, it is about $22.5 million each biennium. We expect to bill 11.3 million next year.
Okay, so we bill that.
We bill that, yes.
Okay, and so do we expect that to go past this biennium and into future, or do you think the legislation is going to change that?
Everything that I know via our grants manager is this should continue for several more biennia.
The
Mhm.
Councilmember Daughtry, the Move Ahead Washington legislation was a 16-year
Oh, 16.
transportation package. Now, having said that, any legislature can change policy, but that's the baseline.
So the other question I would have is, I mean, I know we're looking out for this, but it's just on top of my mind, is that the legislature may not change the program much, but they might change the billable formula that we can use to draw that down based on maybe actuals or 10% above actuals or something like that. So I don't know how it's billed, and I'm not asking that question right now, but it just crossed my mind that legislature is, sorry, Strom, they're fickle. So we gotta be careful of those things.
Mhm. Mhm. In 2024, we're anticipating both a service and a ridership increase. We're looking to increase our service from 548,000 community transit service hours to 577,000 hours. And this is the result mainly of the Orange Line opening in March, as well as service changes projected for September. Also not reflected in this chart, but we will be working with the RAD team in the future to incorporate the ZIP service hours. We're expecting an additional 18,500 ZIP hours in 2024. So I think that's good news. And then customers are expected to increase, riders are expected to increase by about 8.5% next year. We project to see a return of our ridership in the 2027-2028 timeframe. Our general fund total expenditures for 2024 are 328 million. This includes both operating expenses and non-operating. We'll have department operating expenses of 196 million. This includes all of the expenses to deliver service. And then another 97 million of excuse me, funds transferred to the capital projects and reserves. Knew this was going to happen. And then our other expenses, which are purchase transportation, fuel, and wow,
Mary's been talking so much that she's beginning to wear her voice out.
it is, yeah.
20% down.
Fuel and the cost pools are anticipating increasing to 35 million for 2024. This is a breakdown of our operating expenses by category. We're looking at 213 million in operating expenses for 2024. On the right, you can see a pie chart which breaks down the expenses by category. Wages and benefits are about 60% of our total operating expense. So that would be the cost of coach operators, mechanics, and all of our other support employees. The primary reason for that increase is the addition of coach operators and facilities employees that will help deliver the service. Our purchase transportation budget is increasing for a number of reasons. We expect that the demand for our DART service will increase next year. We also have added innovative services into the mix. So ZIP is now a permanent service that community transit delivers. The last factor in the purchase transportation increase is contracted commuter service. That's the service we purchased from First Transit that has a contractual increase that's been included in the budget. Service is such elements as advertising, professional services, contract maintenance services, intergovernmental services. We have a number of big initiatives included in this category. We have several marketing campaigns for such things as the Orange Line, for the Network 2024 changes, for the Youth Ride Free policy, as well as a lot of recruitment expenses. It's imperative that we continue to recruit coach operators into 2024. Our fuel budget is not increasing at all significantly. We're looking at similar rates in 2024 as 2023. We did see a spike in our fuel costs just this fall. We're not sure if those are going to continue or as we expect to normalize into 2024. We do still include the fuel reserve in our budget.
So it's interesting to see.
Mhm.
It's been a while since we've seen fuel as a bright spot in the budget. But it seems like it would go up just because of adding routes and lines. You'd think you'd be using more fuel, even if the price comes down lower, you'd be using more, right?
I would think so, except that this is a projection based on the miles that our maintenance director expects us to drive. So he's probably made some refinements since the 2023 budget. We'll revisit this.
Well, that's true. We're taking less routes down south commuter, so yeah. Makes sense now.
And then parts and supplies, which is a category that predominantly covers the parts and the fluids and the other things that we use to maintain and keep our buses operational, is increasing slightly for 2024. In 2024, we expect to have 906 approved FTEs in our operating budget. This is an increase from about 860 FTEs in our 2023 operating budget. We try to maintain an 80-20 split with our employee count. This is based on the National Transit Database definitions. We try to ensure that 20% and no more than 20% of our employees are administrative, while the other 80% support operations, maintenance, and facilities. So this budget does a good job at maintaining that ratio. In addition to our operating employees, we have about 49 capital project related employees. Most of those employees are in the project support areas. We also have some employees who support the capital program by doing procurement, grant management, and capital asset accounting. Our proposed 2024 budget is about 203 million. This is actually a 14% decrease from the 2023 proposed budget. It may sound a little interesting, but this is actually good news. This shows that we've completed some projects. We've completed facilities master plan phases 1, 3, and 5. That would be the operations building, the transportation administration building, and the ride store. Did I say administration or did I say operations?
The training and storage facility.
Excuse me, the training facility. We'll finish the ride store next year. We've also finished a large percentage of the Orange Line, and much of that budget is not carrying forward into 2024. So that is the reason why our program is actually going down a bit. Here's a snapshot of our capital budget by category. Our largest category of project are the zero emissions projects. For 2024, the large projects are the 2 vehicle procurements. We're looking at a battery electric order of about $15 million for 10 battery electric 40-foot buses. And then 19 bus procurement for 60-foot fuel cell electric BRT buses. And those 2 orders total about 65.6 million. The remainder of the ZE projects are things like utility infrastructure and program development. Our next largest category are the SWIFT programs. We still do have the orange line budgeted. That's about 25 million, but the remainder of the SWIFT projects include green line and blue line expansions and enhancements, as well as design and planning for the gold line. Our reserves and contingencies include a zero emissions and a facilities master plan contingency. We still do have facilities master plan projects of 17 million on the books. That would be phases 3A and B, the operating bases, as well as the ride store. And we have 2 new phases coming up. We have phases 7 and 8, which are the zero emissions design work for the operating bases. We have budgets for some miscellaneous projects and personnel of 11 million. We're replacing van pool and DART vehicles, about 8 million. And then we still try to maintain our facilities and our IT projects in a state of good repair. And that innovative services project or innovative project, excuse me, is the NG Orca project and a few other IT related projects. Our capital program is funded by probably about 40% grants, and most of these are Federal Transit Administration grants. We're looking at another 22 million in funding coming in next year for the remainder of the orange line. The other BRT lines also will have grant revenues supporting them, as well as some state and some formula funds for the facilities master plan, specifically the ride store. And then we're planning for a zero emissions grant of about $20 million to support that bus purchase. So now we get to the fun part. This is our cash position for 2024. Here's a snapshot of our operating fund. We start out the year with about 127 million in our operating fund. The general fund revenue is estimated at 273 million. We have current expenses and obligations of 231 million, and we'll have an operating margin of about 42 million. So
I'm
Yes.
sorry, I need to spin back a little bit. You talked about that we were planning on a $20 million grant for zero emission, and that 20 million, is that reflected in our revenues for the year?
it's reflected in our capital program revenues. So yes,
And is there any reason to believe we wouldn't get that grant? And if we did, what would we do then?
so our grant is an estimate by our federal lobbyist. The belief at the present is that that's a conservative amount and that we might receive several of those over several cycles. So we're hoping that that's not all and that we receive significantly more than that. But at this point, we felt that that was a conservative estimate.
So we have a really high degree of confidence that we'll get at least 20 million. Okay.
Yes.
I would just add to Mary's comments that we did a review of the first round of zero emission grant awards made by FTA this year after the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law, and we assessed what we think we could successfully compete for based on what some of our peer agencies received. So we feel like we're in alignment with FTA's practice. The same caveats apply, though, as the legislative ones from Olympia, that Congress can always change the program. So we'll be watching all that very closely.
As in past years, we have a fairly significant operating margin. The operating margin, as well as our beginning cash balance, allow us to transfer about 97 million to our capital projects and to our reserves. We also are transferring some funds back from several finished capital projects. So if we don't use all the funds on a project, they go back into the general fund and get reallocated. So we're expecting our ending cash balance to be about $77 million. After we take out 3 months of operating reserves and about 5.5 million for fuel reserves, we have additional margin for sustainability and for expansion. And here is a snapshot of what Community Transit's total agency reserves should look like by the end of 2024. We're expecting an operating fund or a general fund cash balance of 59 million for the operating and fuel reserves. The 18 million we just talked about. We're planning for a vehicle replacement reserve of almost 44 million. That is intended to cover the replacement of all of our revenue vehicles. That would be coaches, DART vehicles, and van pool vans. We also are planning for about $27 million for replacement of our infrastructure. So for facilities infrastructure, if we need, a roof or an HVAC system or something fails, we have that reserve available. We also have made considerable investments in the past in our IT infrastructure, and we're maintaining a $10 million reserve to replace or to refurbish our IT infrastructure.
So, and you said about 3 months of operating in reserves, so about 16.7% or whatever that works out to be. Yeah, so it's been good, right? The sales tax and like our cities, like Community Transit, expected to take a hit during COVID, and we didn't, which is people stayed home and just shopped on Amazon, had it delivered, which was nice. But I also remember having to shut Sunday service and cutting, well, a number of us on here went through that before. So I'm just curious, and it's probably standard, the 16.7%, but also considering maybe that could be higher, because it's probably not if, but when we kind of go through a downturn. And I always like it very conservative and like a little more in reserves, because I especially remember cutting service, and that's always tough.
So the standard for many local governments is approximately 2 months of operating reserves. We're planning for 3 months. We are also very well reserved or mitigated for future situations, economic downturns or what have you, with the cash we're holding in our other reserve funds. So for instance, we're expecting to have 192 million at the end of 2024 in the Facilities and Technology Fund. And that's a reserve for zero emissions at $92 million after the bus purchases are taken out. $85 million for service quality, innovation, and sustainability. And that's for future large programs. It could cover zero emissions. It could cover BRTs, any operational needs we have. We have $10 million for the bus program and another 5 million for facilities master plan. So with all of the cash that we have on our books, we are very well reserved against any future negative possibility. And then we have some smaller amounts in the workers' compensation fund. This covers all of the current and future projected claims that employees on workers' compensation could incur. And then we have a small balance in our debt service fund to cover the annual debt payment. So in total, we expect our reserves to be about $346 million by the end of 2024. So Rick spoke earlier about our strategic themes and priorities. I wanted to directly tie those to initiatives funded in our budget. So some of the initiatives in the budget that directly relate to delivering excellent service. We're adding 39 new transportation employees in the budget, as well as 4 maintenance employees. We're investing heavily in our marketing and advertising campaigns to help us attract and retain customers, and to help them understand what's available to them in terms of service. We're continuing to invest in our employee training. So this helps both our employees be better employees, as well as to provide better service or to continue to do their jobs excellently out in the field. So that would be things like, let's see, training for compliance, agency compliance training, maintenance training, transportation dispatchers and supervisors training, and then we have agency performance management training as well. So we're investing heavily in our service and in our staff. Recruiting continues to be a significant theme in our budget. We're spending quite a bit on our advertising budget to bring in more coach operator candidates. It's critical that we can open the Orange Line and that we have enough staff to do so. The safety program is fully staffed and ready to evaluate its successes. We're training them as well, and we're also continuing with the social worker program in that area. Innovative services. So we've converted ZIP to a full-fledged regular community transit service for the 2024 budget. And we hope to do that in the future to several other innovative services pilots. DEI. So some of the things that Nashika spoke about are funded in this budget. She is including consulting to roll out the Agency Equity Committee and also agency DEI training. So what are we doing to build for the future? Well, we've got the facilities master plan at 17 million, plus a 4 million contingency. We will be working on phases 3A and B, which are the operating bases, as well as the ride store remodel, plus the 2 new phases that address zero emissions design at the operating bases. SWIFT projects also addressing the future, but also how we deliver excellent service this year and next year. That's a large part of our capital budget. Sustainability. We are continuing to make steps toward a greener fleet and to implement green technology in our fleet and operations. And then state of good repair, we continue to budget for projects that keep our existing buildings and infrastructure in good repair and up to date. And then last, we are planning for fiscal sustainability. We have the $346 million of reserves planned for year-end 2024, and we feel that addresses sustainability very thoroughly. So what is coming up next? Well, next Thursday, there's a public hearing on the proposed budget. So with any luck, we'll have somebody or many members of the public come in and rave about the budget, or perhaps comment by email. If you still have questions about what's in the budget, please feel free to send them to me or to Inju or Nathan. If you do have those questions, we will make every effort to answer them for you, and we'll provide you with a document on the 16th of November at Finance Performance and Oversight to address the questions. So if you could get those questions in by Friday, November 10th, then we will try to turn that around quickly. We will be presenting the budget resolution to Finance Performance and Oversight Committee also on the 16th. I know it says a possible year-end budget amendment up here, but actually it looks like we probably won't be doing a budget amendment this go around. The target for adoption of the budget is December 7th. That would be your December board meeting.
I just question on that. So you're saying we likely won't have this year budget amendment is because we don't need one, or we don't have one ready?
It's because we don't need one.
No, that's the right answer. That makes
Yes,
sense.
yes, we don't have anything to amend this go around. Does anybody have additional questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
A couple comments. First of all, yeah, thank you, Mary. Just another phenomenal job. I've seen a number of these budgets and they get better every year. Really nice work. And, it strikes me, and Joe probably remember this, maybe some others, maybe Kim, back several years ago, we would talk about this capital pot of money we had, and we needed to grow it because we had all kinds of stuff that needed to be done. And it just strikes me as I look through this budget and see a 14% decrease that we've actually handled a lot of those capital needs, which is really a great accomplishment for the agency and sets us up for a very dynamic future. So kudos to the team, Rick and the team, for executing that. And now we realize a little bit of cushion in the budget, which is always good. Like Joe said, maybe we can ride some things out this time around if we run into anything. So I think that's just really great. Thank you for that. And yeah, it's my second time through it. I don't have any additional questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else with questions? What did he say?
I have lots of questions, but not right now. Well, I do have one. So with all this reserves that we have we ever given any thought to having a fund for low interest loans to board members?
I would have to check with the state constitution. I think it prohibits that.
Oh, that sounds like Congress, I think.
Yeah, what was that, the paycheck for government?
Yeah, I do also just wanted to make a comment on this. I was reading through this online and I'm really impressed with the work that you have put into this. And I like the way it ties in with all of the projects that we have going on and the maintenance that we have going on. And it's a good overview reading the budget, not only for the numbers, but just what it is we're doing and what our expectations are. So kudos and thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a great team. Well, if you do have questions, please feel free to collect them and send them to one of us in an email, and we will make every effort to answer those questions thoroughly.
I'll make a comment on that too. I feel obligated with all the great work in here, go through it with a fine tooth comb and find at least something that I will ask you about.
Okay, fair enough.
They had me on Monday, so you can't come up with anything I didn't already ask.
Challenge accepted.
Well, I asked, go ahead, would you mind telling them the answers you gave me today that she went back and found? Because they were interesting and I bet you that you don't know, and maybe Rick doesn't even know.
Councilmember Yeah, Shirley asked a lot of good questions. Among those where she was asking how many employees we had in Cascade Building here. So we have 210 employees here. And also another question she asked was how many support vehicle fleets we have. It's 121 in total, which was more than I thought we had. So it was interesting.
Yeah. See, did you guys know that?
Sounds like they're coming up with more questions.
No, this was, you know, I'm not gonna ask all the board to read this, because it does take hours, but it was so informational and covered everything. And like most things, one page might give me a question, but 2 or 3 pages down the road, the answer was
Okay.
there. So thank you for all your work. Wow. And we are in good shape. It makes us feel good. It beats the heck out of you sitting and telling us we're $100 million, you know. Yeah, so that's good. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, if I could thank the board for its support and your leadership. We're in a beneficial position because several years ago, this board made a decision to ask the citizens of Snohomish County to invest. And they said yes. And so we're, you know, in an enviable spot compared to some of our peer agencies because we can invest in a higher quality network. We can invest in BRT. We can try new things on the service side like Zip. And we can invest in our facilities to attract talent and retain talent. So I'm truly grateful, you know, for the foresight this board had, and the staff I know appreciates it. And we feel the burden of responsibility to show a good return on that. And so we're really focused on next year's opportunity in that regard. You know, we know every time we open a new BRT line, we attract a new wave of customers, and we're hopeful that that'll occur as well with the light rail investment and the implementation of a more frequent local network and those new express routes. So, you know, I said at the top of the conversation, we were super excited about proposing this budget, and it's for all those reasons. So thank you.
Well, I would like to add one thing. We're down to the chair's report, and I just have one thing. Last Friday, Rick and Melissa and I, along with the mayor of Arlington, met with Amazon. And we met with their top officials. And it was an extremely interesting conversation. Melissa, you know, I've worked with her before. I've listened to her. She's reported everything. But she was so outstanding on Friday that I was sitting there thinking, and about halfway through, I was looking at these 3 guys that she was talking to. And my thought was, oh my God, they're going to offer her a job. I know, but boy, I got to tell you, yeah, that was, they have already hired 1,500 and have 1,000 more. And yeah, they definitely want things. Everybody on there, it was, that's an incredible building. I really appreciate, and the mayor did come back to me the other day, and she was really, really appreciated that the 2 of you came. We didn't know, and they just, yeah. Anyway, it was really great. Really appreciated all that. So I will see if there's any other, and I forgot to ask, was there anyone online that had a question on the budget? I apologize. I keep forgetting. We've got people up there. Okay, then let's go down quickly through the board members. Kim, did you have anything?
Yeah, I just want to convey my pleasure at the work that you do here and the culture that you have done since we had the problems way back in 2010, 2012 era. There are several of us board members who were here throughout that. And I think the thing that's really important to understand is that the culture of the community transit family never wavered. And it just kept bouncing and it kept going and kept getting better. And it's really good that we can see some new leadership coming up through the ranks instead of going out and having to search for that talent, because the culture that we have here designs that into the process. And so it's really, really, really great to see that. And I'm just so impressed with this organization, and it's what keeps me coming back to try to be a board member. And I'm hoping that we can change the governance a little bit, so when I fall off the council and like Stevens, I can still be a board member at Community Transit. So we're gonna have to work on that. So.
Okay, Mayor Fritzell, are you still with us? Okay. Mayor Marine, do you have anything?
Yeah, again, I'm also always impressed with the staff and the finance, and Amazon may not offer them a job, but Mukilteo might, you never know. So also having gone to the APTA conferences, I'm just always impressed with at the expo. You expect buses, right? They can drive those, but they have full trains. I don't even know how they get trains in the convention center, but anyway, it would be fun to just watch that. They should do a Netflix on how to put that together and how they get, I mean, it's huge. It is, I mean, it takes you like 20 minutes to walk from one end to the other. And that's if you don't stop and talk to anybody or any booths. So I try really hard not to come back with a bunch of ideas, right? You know, be that guy. Hey, I got these brochures. I think we need to, I told him to call you, Rick. No, so I didn't do that. So you'd be happy about
that. Jared Mead, are you still with us? Do you have anything? Okay. Tom.
I just wanted to say that I did go to the ribbon cutting for the opening of the training center over across the way. And it was fun, and it was affirming to see how excited the people that have to do the training were to have their own facility that they didn't have to tear down and set up every day. And they had to dodge people pulling out in the morning with the buses and bringing them in at night. And so it was just a real pleasure to see how excited people were about that. And they wouldn't let me drive a bus.
I'm really glad. Mayor Neri.
Nothing additional. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Norton.
No, I have nothing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Peterson. Okay, I don't see. Sid Roberts, I see that you're still there.
I am still here. I went over a couple of weeks ago to the Mayor's Exchange, AWC Mayor's Exchange in Leavenworth, and I did my typical early morning walk. And as I'm walking down Main Street in Leavenworth, it's still dark, it's quiet. Here comes an all-electric bus, and all I could hear was the whine of the tires. It was really interesting to me, and it just, proves that this is the wave of the future. And so I was kind of converted right there as I saw it whiz by me and just hardly making a sound. So it was very interesting. So that was kind of interesting for me. That's it.
Councilmember Gallagher, do you have anything? Okay. That brings us down to, we don't have an executive session, no. So any other business? Well, thank you.
Not from staff.
Oh, okay. So thank you, everybody, for coming, and I'm actually seeing sun out there. I don't think it's supposed to last. They're expecting 2 feet on the pass and freezing here tomorrow night. So make sure all your faucets at your homes. That was what I did first thing this morning, because we don't want frozen water. Anyway, if that's everything, then I move to adjourn.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.